people of the internet.
Hey, everybody.
Who I will see again one day.
You and I might actually be able to see each other one day if this smoke ever clears. You know, air quality is one of those things that, you know, we kind of take for granted until we don't have it, right?
Dude, absolutely. And the persistence of it is the toughest part. I mean, I'm glad none of it's close, but, you know, setting that aside, yeah, it's super annoying and persistent.
Dang, now you got to wear a mask inside and outside, huh?
Totally. But I can't tell you, we bought a house that was built in 1952 on the southwest side of Colorado Springs. And in general, you don't really need AC here, but we did it a couple of years ago anyway. And it was after a wildfire experience where, because you have to open your windows in the mornings because it gets really cool in the morning. That's how you cool the whole house off. But after the last wildfire, we got AC, and it was one of the best decisions we ever made because we can just keep the windows closed. Otherwise, it's masks inside and outside.
Love it. Awesome. So looks like we're still getting a few people logging in here. Just want to give a little bit of context. As you saw from the headline, you know what this session is going to be about. We're trying to we want to talk about something that we've recently really figured out ourselves and have started implementing with B2B growth, and started to put some structure around it because we think it's going to be helpful for anybody doing an interview-based podcast. And so we're going to talk about two different things. One we call the POV discovery process, and this is a process that allows you to discover the unique points of view of the guests that you're featuring on your show. I really think this is this was a game changer for us in terms of the quality of the interviews that we were doing. I think Logan can speak to that. I think Dan has started doing this. I've started doing this. And Timmy from our team, who's a content strategist on our team, he is going to be leading this presentation today because he's done the lion's share of the legwork, really fleshing this out and developing the framework around POV discovery. And then the second thing he'll be talking about is the what, why, how framework. So you've got POV discovery that typically happens pre-interview, whether that's on the same call. Maybe you just slice out 15 minutes of the hour-long call, and the first 15 is for pre-interview, or whether you do a separate call. Either way, the POV discovery process happens on the front end, and then what, why, how is the framework we'll talk about for how to actually structure the interview itself. So some of you, Ethan, the OG here, he's been doing this for I think a year and a half now. So we certainly don't want to break any existing systems that you guys have going, but hopefully you can glean some insights from what we've been learning with B2B growth and implement some, toss out what you don't think is a fit for your particular show. But so without further ado, I will hand over the reins to Timmy. Timmy, are you able to share your screen? I know we were working on a deck right before this. We can pop up your deck real quick. If I need to enable something, just let me know. Oh, there it goes.
Okay. I can't tell if you guys can see this in presentation view or
just go to present in the top right corner.
Okay.
Top right corner in Google Slides. Yeah.
Okay. Now this is throwing me off. Hey everybody. How you guys doing? I'm going to be a little honest here. I'm a little bit nervous. I've never presented for a customer mastermind before. I feel about as nervous as I felt when I first started hosting podcasts, which was a couple of years ago. So bear with me, but I'm really excited because the reason that this got developed is James and I were having conversations around how we have some clients that ask us for like scripts that they can go off of for their interviews. And it's always been this highly customized process of trying to come up with scripts for specific guests. And I was thinking through, is there something that we could come up with, some sort of templated process that's like, you can do this with any guest completely cold, and you're going to produce good, helpful you're going to accomplish both goals, good, helpful content, while still it's going to help build the relationship for the content-based networking play. So So we put together this POV discovery process, and
hey,
it's
Timmy. I'm gonna stop you real quick. Logan made a note in the chat that I forgot to mention this. If anyone has questions throughout this while Timmy's talking, jot them down in the chat. That way we've got them, and then we've got quite a bit of time earmarked specifically for questions on this stuff. So sorry I didn't mention that before I gave the reins over to you, Timmy. I'll shut up now and let you take it back. But if you have questions, pop them in the chat, and we'll try to get to all of them.
No problem. By all means. Also, I can't see the chat. Maybe I can turn that on, and it's not going to mess me up. Okay, but I still might not see things that are going on in the chat. So please feel free to stop me.
In the second half, we can just go ahead. I'll keep an eye on the chat, and we'll tackle them in the second half, Timmy.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Cool. Okay. So this is what we came up with. And I've been using it for a while. So I host a podcast called Books for Kids. I also co-host B2B Growth. And I've been using this, and it's been working really, really well. So I want to do a live demo of it in this customer mastermind. That's another reason why I'm nervous, because I don't know exactly how that's going to go. But yeah, let's just get to it. So the thesis here is that everyone has content, but they're not always good at identifying it. And this is especially true when your regular guest is somebody that has never done anything like be a guest on a podcast before. And that's definitely true for me with Books for Kids. So on Books for Kids, I'm a kids book author, and the way that my business works is I interview guests to be on Books for Kids that lead literacy associations. So often it's like the secretary of the literacy association. This is somebody that has never been on stage. They've never tried to come up with like content for themselves. They're not doing anything like that. And so they're very, very nervous to come on my show. And they're like, can you tell me what the questions are ahead of time? And, they want it to be like super duper scripted. And my task is like, okay, how can I pull really helpful content out of them that they didn't even know that they had to share? And let me tell you, it has worked really well with the guests that I've had on Books for Kids, where they're basically leaving my show thanking me for pulling content out of them that they're like, wow, I could give a talk because I didn't even know I had this content. And so that's been really, really exciting. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say about this before I just jump to a live demo of it. Yeah, let me just quickly go over what it is. Okay, so it's questions that you ask that we call POV discovery questions. The questions are designed to discover a unique point of view that your guest has. And the reason that we needed to really get into, okay, how can we pull out a unique point of view that the guest has, is because if you ask, originally we used to say, you want to ask your guest what they want to talk about and then try to get them to go as niche as possible. And that's not bad advice. But what happens a lot of times is your guest thinks that they're saying something really profound, but because you did 100 episodes, that they're not saying something profound. They're saying something that everybody is saying. And people that are longtime listeners might not want to hear the same thing, the same generic thing presented every single time. So the questions are designed to get out of them something that's unique, something that your listeners are going to listen to and go, whoa, I've never even thought of that before. Well, that runs completely contrary to what I was told, but oh my gosh, like that kind of content. All right. So what are the questions? I'm partially covered up here. Okay, these are our top. I've got a list of these, and I'll be happy to share it with anybody. But nothing performs better so far than these are our top performing questions. The first one is James's favorite question, which is, what's a commonly held belief you passionately disagree with? And what I do with this question is I try to go, what is a commonly held belief about? And the thing that I say after about is going to depend on that guest that I'm talking to, because that's a way to make this even more niche. So what's a commonly held belief about thing that you passionately disagree with?
So if I were doing this with Ethan, for example, I would say, what's a commonly held belief about video email that you just passionately disagree with?
Yeah, and right out of the gate, like, Ethan, how would you answer that question?
Man, you got me so fired up. Ashley. That it's a parlor trick or a gimmick, that it's a specific tactic to be used today rather than something that belongs in your broader business communication mix, day to day, in and out, with customers, with employees, with prospects, with strategic partners, et cetera.
Yeah, love it. So boom, right there, you've pulled out of your guest a distinct, differentiated point of view that not everyone believes. And that is going to make some good content. And I'll tell you what you do with that next. But here's another one, which is, and I like to add a qualifier if I can get to know my guests a little bit. So it's as it relates to fill in the blank. What is something that everyone who does fill in the blank should stop doing? Or as it relates to such and such, what's something everyone should stop doing?
Yeah. So a few examples there, just based on who I see on the call. A way to tailor this might be, what's something every B2B marketer should stop doing, or what's something that corporate directors are not doing today that they really need to start doing, or what's a commonly held belief in sales, or a commonly held belief about using data. So just kind of structuring it either around the industry that you serve, the role that your customer is in, or the theme of your show. Ethan, you could ask, what's a commonly held belief about customer experience?
Yeah.
Right. Those sorts of things.
Yep. And then the last one is just the opposite of that. Like, what's something that nobody's doing that they should start doing? And it's great when you can input something that you know about your guest, or that your guest is going to have something to say about. Here are a few more that work really well. Something everyone is trying to do that you've discovered a better way to do, a failure that you've experienced that you think a lot of people are headed for. That's just a really another way of getting at what should everybody stop doing. But so often I found it, when you ask the same question differently, you'll get a different answer, or just maybe a more specific answer. What's a resource, tool, or channel that people aren't using correctly or to its fullest? That's sort of another way of getting at what's something that everybody should start doing or start doing differently. And then these are not exactly POV questions, but again, the goal of this was, can I make something that you could just hand me a guest? I could know nothing about this guest. I do a pre-interview with them, and I've got our episode. And I just went through a process. And so I wanted to have some last-ditch questions that pretty much work for everybody. A recent thing you tried in your company that you were surprised by the result of. Now, that's still going to make good content, because we all want to learn from each other's mistakes and things that they're doing right, things that they're doing wrong. So that's still going to make good content. Probably a short episode maybe, but good content. And then what's something you or your team have recently achieved that you're really proud of? You can see that the content here is more likely to be weaker than with the other questions, but they're still good last-ditch questions. I already mentioned you pair them with your guest experience or something that your guest has to say, and it's going to make the questions better. This is the part that you do inside the episode.
So before we get to the what, why, how part, Timmy, can you talk through, so when let's say you ask those first 3 POV discovery questions, how are you thinking about, like, okay, they've given, I've asked them these 3, how are you making the determination on what you want to go with? Because the point for you of the host is to determine what is going to be the point of view that we want to hone in on, because we're not going to talk about all 3 of these points of view in their episode. We want to focus in on one point of view, and then the what, why, how is really how to extrapolate that single point of view to turn it into a full episode so that they can fully flesh out that point of view. How do you make that determination? You toss up a few questions, you're listening to their responses. How do you make that? How do you figure that out? What POV do I go with?
Yeah, great call. So short answer would be that I kind of go with my experience as the host. So if I know that they're saying something, and I know I've already done an episode on that, or I've done an episode already that's very similar to that statement, then I might go with something else that they've said. Sometimes you can really get a sense when you just ask all 3 questions. You're like, okay, they answered something here that I've never heard before. I've never talked about it on the podcast. I know that flies in the face of things that I see other people saying on LinkedIn, but but in my heart, it like rings true. Like there's truth here. Like that would be a moment where you would highlight and go, okay, I think we're going to make the episode about that one. When I do it on Books for Kids, I mostly go based off of, have I done an episode on this? No? Well, then I'm probably going to go with that one. If I think that I, the host, could learn a lot from doing a particular one, I might go with that one. Because for me, I'm not a literacy educator. I'm a kids book author. And I'm learning so much about literacy by interviewing literacy specialists on the Books for Kids podcast. So I learn about subcategories and all of the terms and all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of times I'll make the decision based on what I think I'm going to learn doing the episode. And I'm the voice of the audience on my podcast. My goal is not to sound like the expert. My goal is to get the expertise out of the expert.
Yeah,
so that
advocate
means,
for your audience.
Exactly. So
I would say one addition that could be interesting, with the volume of episodes we do on B2B growth, I was kind of smiling as Timmy was saying, like, guests say something that they think is very profound, but you've heard it, a number of times before. We've done episodes that almost contradict each other at times. I had Joe Chernoff on talking about product-led growth and how you need to stay closer to your product with your content, and then had a follow-up episode where we were talking about going further away and just adding value several layers away from your product. But when I was determining where to go with that second guest, I was like, this could be interesting because it somewhat contradicts what was said in this other episode. And then I can advocate for the listener and say, well, actually, this point of view, like, I know Joe said this back on this episode, like, what would you say to that? Right. And then I was able to actually show some overlap between those 2 points of view and kind of play devil's advocate between them. Again, trying to advocate for the listener, as James put it. So that might be another alarm bell to, well, I should really pull at this thread because I've heard somebody else kind of take the opposite point of view, either on LinkedIn or elsewhere, or maybe in a past episode.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I agree. I don't think that I've produced enough content on Books for Kids yet where I'm going to be able to do that a lot, but I hope to get there. So let me try this really quick. I want to try like sort of a faux mock-up of what I'm explaining just live here. So could I get a volunteer to be a pretend guest for me? And this is going to be beautiful because I'm not a super expert marketer. So, my experience as content strategist is like, how do we get great content? So I need a volunteer. And I can't see the chat. So what I really want is for just somebody to unmute themselves and say, I volunteer. Do it.
I mean, I'll always volunteer. I just wanted to see if someone else wanted to
You want to give somebody else a chance? Anybody besides
I nominate Ethan Butte.
And that means JK just volunteered to distribute himself, because that's how we're doing it around here.
I'm pretty sure he just volunteered for me to do it as if I was him.
JK, can I test it out on you? It's
Sure.
going to be better because I know nothing about you.
Okay.
So just briefly, what's your company? What's your role?
So I recently switched companies. I was at BombBomb working with Ethan. But now I'm at Flatfile. It's a B2B SaaS company. We do data onboarding. So we make it easy for customers to ingest data into applications or between applications.
Got it.
And
okay.
I do marketing.
And you do marketing. Okay.
I do marketing.
What are you mostly doing as a marketer for them? Like what are some of your activities that you do a lot?
A lot of it is performance marketing. So it's a lot of like ads and, of that sort, like acquisition focus, lead gen focus, demand gen. But we're also a startup, so wearing multiple hats. We actually launched a podcast today. So that's one thing that I was helping do. Thanks Logan and James and everyone else on the Sweetfish team. So wearing many hats.
Okay, so I don't know a whole lot about what data onboarding is. I mean, honestly, I don't even know how I wouldn't even be able to define it. But what I want to show that you can do is when nothing else, so you could ask it off of their expertise, like maybe the expertise of their company. I could ask a question like, JK, what's a commonly held belief about data onboarding that you passionately disagree with? So I would ask that and I would see what you've got. So do you have anything that you would say there?
That there isn't a better way, honestly. Like it's one thing that we solve for is a problem that's existed for quite a while, but there was never a solution for. And so people were data wrangling. It's actually a term that exists, data wrangling. And they're basically taking Excel sheets and forcing data, manually wrangling it into usable product data, depending on where they're taking that data to and putting it into, right? So we have a better way of doing that now. Like we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to map that data properly so that you, Jason, sorry, my son just walked in.
That also happens when you're doing a podcast episode.
Yes, totally. There we go.
So there, if I was going to go with that one, which actually, before I do that, let me try one off the job function. So JK, okay. As it relates to marketing for a startup company that does data onboarding, what is something that other people in your shoes should start doing?
Ooh.
Or what is something that other people... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, there's a couple things. One, don't underestimate the power of a wait list, even in B2B. It's pretty crazy. Like, we've been building a product out for the past few months, and we have a wait list of almost 1,000 companies, ranging from Fortune 100 companies to startups that want our product. And we're like using this wait list, which is traditionally more of like a B2C approach, honestly. And it works. Like people, they join a wait list and they get excited about stuff. They're still human beings, even if they're working at a company, right? So I would say, like, don't underestimate the power of a wait list. And also don't underestimate the power of Facebook in B2B marketing. Like if you have good targeting and you know how to actually target your audience, it can be super effective.
Great.
It's actually one of our biggest channels.
So if I was going to go with that answer, the title of my episode might be something like two things that every marketer in your shoes. So I don't know how I would say that exactly.
I would just say B2B marketer, Timmy.
Yeah. Should start doing. And the two that you should start doing would be don't underestimate the power of a wait list and don't underestimate the power of Facebook marketing. So that might be two things that everyone should stop doing. Underestimating the power of wait lists, underestimating the power of Facebook. So then in our interview episode, I would what, why, and how that thesis. So I would say, so JK, what exactly do you mean when you say people are underestimating the power of a wait list?
I was gonna say, like, I mean, I've been told by other people in the B2B space that like wait lists don't work, like explicitly. Like, why are you trying to generate a wait list? That's not going to work in the B2B world. And I'm like, well, actually it is working for us. Like, we're slowly rolling a lot of those companies onto our beta platform. They're giving feedback. They're helping us build the product out so that when we go to general availability, it's going to meet the needs of the most people, right? Like on that wait list. And so people are going to be super excited about it and they're going to be ready to buy it, or at least ready to evaluate it and get it into the sales funnel.
And why is it, do you think, that people are underestimating? Like, why does this problem exist?
Probably because in the B2B space, you have a buying committee. So it's not like it's usually not an individual decision maker.
I'm going to cut you off, JK.
Yeah.
This is a great episode. So I don't know if you guys are noticing, but we're doing an episode right now. I started with a what. I started with a clarification question. My big what is, what's your thesis? And the way that you get that out of them is you ask one of those POV questions, and then in the interview you just say, hey, we were talking about blah, 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 blah. Can you just unpack what what you said? And then you say your thesis, and I say, what exactly did you mean when you said blah, blah, blah? And then we're off. I'm now going to start asking for the why. I'm going to start asking for the theory behind what you're saying, and why is it that people aren't adopting the thing that you're saying. And then the episode has got to include hows. This is a problem that I see a lot in podcast episodes, is that I'm not listening to this episode, and then where is the moment where I'm supposed to do something? If that's not in the episode, then you're wasting your episode. It's not as valuable content. It really gets valuable when you can force your guest to say, okay, JK, give me an action guide. How do I start implementing a
wait list?
I already forgot the terms. Let's say that I'm at a company that's doing data wrangling. How do I stop? Give me, what's step 1? Okay, now what's step 2? Like, you've got to get them to do that. I love a podcast episode where when I hear it, the next, before the episode is even over, I'm doing something with my phone that's directly about the thing that the hosts are saying that I should be doing. That's a good podcast episode. So it's got to have both. It's got to have a powerful unpacking of the why. Like the why are people thinking the way that they're thinking, and why should they stop thinking the way that they're thinking, and the how. What am I supposed to do? Another great how is the pitfalls. Give me the pitfalls. How could somebody that's trying to go from data wrangling to, again, I'm already messing up the terms, somebody that thinks that they're, go ahead.
So something you're going back to here. You keep going back to data wrangling, Timmy, but I actually think so. If I'm listening to JK's POVs and I'm asking different questions, the way we framed him up originally was around specifically his product. And I would say that is likely going to result in you creating content that is very pitchy and salesy.
Yeah.
When you frame it differently, and we started asking JK about, what are things that other B2B marketers should stop doing?
Yes.
Then we got on wait lists and Facebook, you leveraging Facebook in the B2B space. Those two things, on a show like B2B Growth, I would much rather talk about wait lists than I would data wrangling, because that's very much centric around JK's product. It's going to come across very salesy. And it's not going to be as helpful universally for your audience. So going back to the question I asked Timmy a few minutes ago of how do you determine what POV you want to go with? Now, you're likely, if you're asking 2 or 3 different POV discovery questions, I would tend to stay away from the point of view that's very overtly about their product.
Yes.
Just because I don't think the lion's share of your audience is going to want to listen to a product pitch.
I see 2 common pitfalls over and over again. One is going too salesy or too pitchy, which inadvertently you can set your guest up that way without even realizing it, right? It's not always on the guest that's just I'm going to come on and give a product pitch. But if you kind of go that way, so if you noticed, one of the fallback questions was, what's something that your team has recently achieved that you're really proud of? That could prompt Cassidy, to say something that they're doing in the marketing department. We pulled off camp revenue and da 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 da. Or it could be, well, we won this award, and so you have to, as the host, be ready for, okay, that's great. I'm going to move on to another question and just kind of keep going, right? Because
Agreed.
One of those could lead to something really good, and other something pitchy, and then the other, which is the whole basis behind these POV discovery questions. The other pitfall, if your guest doesn't get too pitchy, they usually don't go granular enough. I've literally had people say, "Oh, I can keep this high level." And I tell them that's exactly what I don't want, right?
Yep.
The marketers that listen to our show, they don't need good reminders about sales and marketing alignment or being human in their marketing. They need to know what's something you changed in a camp. Where did you get into an email nurture sequence and said, this is way too much about us, we need to change it. And what was that process like, right? That's different than, you need to be human in your marketing. And there's 11.2 buyers in the buyer committee,
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff. So,
question for you, Logan and James. Would you guys say that an episode that's 2 things that every B2B marketer should stop doing, and in its waitlist and Facebook, is that not is it a better episode? How 3 ways
I
you're
would-
getting waitlisting wrong.
Yeah,
I
would
would
do
focus
or
on
the
one
other.
of those.
Yeah.
I would do one or the other. Yeah, exactly. I would do one or the other. The tactic most B2B marketers are skipping. Hint, it's waitlist, or something like that. I'm not a great headline writer on the fly, but you
Yeah.
can see where I'm going.
What's good about this, honestly, this is where I was headed, which is what I was really trying to do was just demo, like, here is how a what, why, how process goes. Now, the more you do episodes and the more you talk to guests that match your listener profile, the more you start to learn about subcategories like waitlist, and you're like, oh, we can do it. This guy knows a lot about this. We can do a whole episode on just the 5 things that people should stop doing as it relates to this thing.
And an example there would be, ABM is something we've talked about a number of times on B2B growth. But if I find something like, Catherine, you guys are using your podcast as ABM. All right, let's dig into that, right? And it's not another question about why ABM. It's how within this niche, within that subcategory that your guests have brought up, like sales and marketing alignment, like ABM, like LinkedIn. You start to know, okay, we've done this before, but we've kind of touched here, and here. I've never heard anyone say something like this on LinkedIn. Or
I don't.
This
Yeah.
on ABM.
So we rail all the time on, like, we don't need another episode on sales and marketing alignment, but I would be very excited if in POV discovery, I realized that this VP of marketing actually does a weekly call with their rep. And this is the agenda of what that call looks like so that they can get to sales and marketing or so they can get to sales marketing alignment. Yes. Let's talk through the agenda of that call, because that's super granular and specific and really, really helpful. Instead of just your sales and marketing teams need to be aligned. And so, Timmy, can you speak a little bit to not getting caught up on, because this was confusing to me a little bit at first. Like, it's the what, why, how framework, but your what questions could have how in it. Your why questions, could have what in it. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, it's all about the goal of the question. So exactly, your what questions could start with how, your how questions could start with what. But what's the goal of the question? Is it identification or definition? Like getting them to say, what exactly do you mean when you say blah, 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 blah? Well, that's a what question, because we're trying to identify something or define something. Why questions are very, very important, because you want your episodes to be persuasive. Well, the only way for them to be persuasive is for you to unpack the theory, reason, rationale of what they're saying. And so any question that does that is a why question. And then how questions are all about the tangible. So if you're giving your guests something tangible to do or to stop doing, and an outline, this is really important, like a step-by-step action guide, then if it's driving towards that, it's a how question. And a great thing that's also a how question is getting your guest to talk about how somebody who's trying to do what they're saying could easily get it wrong. And that's a great one, because it's going to tell people pitfalls that they need to avoid.
Yeah. And the thing I'll also point out here, James and Timmy did a good job of identifying the what, why, how don't always start the same. The other thing I'll say be flexible with is you don't always need the same amount of time for the what, why, and how, depending on the topic or the interview. So let's take our example of interviewing that marketing leader about, a weekly call that they have with their sales counterpart, or even, a group of reps on their team or something like that. The what might be very granular. The what isn't, what is sales and marketing alignment? It's, what is this thing that you started to do? Okay. And it's not why has this been important? Why is sales and marketing alignment important? It's maybe, why did you start doing this? And what were you doing before? Right? Because even though I'm saying, what were you doing before? I'm asking, well, why did you change? Why did you implement this process? Right? And now I can ask some questions. All right, let's talk about what that looks like, but that's really leading into the how do you do it? Okay, after you've been doing this for 3 weeks, did you change anything? Right? Those sorts of things. So in that episode, I'm going to jump the what and the why pretty quickly and spend a lot more time on the how. Whereas if someone's talking about something that doesn't fit into one of these categories, you've already touched on a bit, but it's getting very granular. It's it's something that oh, I need to spend some time because they're bringing up a new term like content-based networking or a category or something like that. You need to unpack that what and the why that led up to it before you get to the how. So be flexible with those three portions depending on, where it fits. Is it a big new category, or is it going really niche within something that people already understand the why of?
Yep, that's a great point, Logan, and it just speaks to one of the things on here, which is not being afraid to interrupt your guest to lead the conversation where it needs to go. A few other ones was, I said this already, don't worry about sounding smart. You're the voice of the audience. I love to ask the question, hey, for anyone who's listening who might be less familiar, what did you mean by blah, 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 blah? And the truth is, I have no idea what they just said. And so that's a great way to save yourself while you're not the smart one in the room. Don't lengthen stupid stuff. So that, like, if they're talking about something that is just a tangent that's derailing the conversation, don't what, why, and how that. Just go right to. So another question I wanted to ask you was blah 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 blah. And of course, focus on actionability, which Logan, you unpacked as well. And I talked about earlier, which is like, I want the listener who's listening to have something that they have to start doing right as they're listening. I want their ears burning, and they're like, I need to grab my phone. I need to make a note. I need to text so-and-so on the team or something like that. Or the last thing that I really have before we get into Q&A really quickly is just, we have this other thing that I don't think we've done a talk on it yet, but I know if we haven't, it's coming. And we just made an episode on it on B2B growth, and that's original research. And it deserves a whole focus in and of itself.
Yeah, month after next, we'll be talking about how to do that.
Awesome. I'm loving doing original research. It is super fun. You get to get your guests talk. Like this is what I wanted to say about it, which is it's a really great way to get a guest that has never given content before to start talking and start feeling at ease, and warms them up before you start asking POV discovery questions. So we do a lot of original research on the back end. We have somebody on the show, and then we say, hey, really quickly, could you answer these 5 questions or these 10 questions? But if you're in a position like I'm in, where I'm interviewing literacy association secretaries for books for kids, they've never given content before. They're afraid to even talk on the mic. My first questions to them are going to be questions about their experience as a secretary and things that they want to know. And so it really puts them at ease. And then I start asking the slightly harder questions of like, what's something about, this thing that we actually touched on in our original research, that people believe that you passionately disagree with. And there's so much more set up to deliver that. They're warmed up, they're put at ease. And that's a really good thing to do. So specifically, if you've got guests on your show that have never given content before, I highly recommend asking original research questions before your POV discovery questions.
So for B2B growth, our original research questions, just off the top of my head, I think we've got 12 that we've been starting to ask people, but it's things like, because obviously we're trying to reach the B2B marketer. So it's what marketing channels are working best for you right now? Is it organic search? Is it organic social? Is it paid social? We're asking things like, what metrics is your CEO looking at? I think one of them is, what's the most underrated B2B marketing trend right now? And then the other one is, what's the most overrated B2B marketing trend or tactic? I forget how we word it, but those are the types of questions that we ask to tee up people to answer a kind of rapid fire style question. And once we get 100 people, I think we've got 20 respondents right now that have answered those questions. Once we get to 100, we're going to roll that up into original research. We're going to do an entire customer mastermind on that in a couple months. But I'm glad you brought that up, Timmy, because it definitely, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. Do we need to reframe doing our original research questions on the front end? But a lot of our guests, because they're marketers,
they're already making content. Yeah.
So they don't necessarily need that rev up like your guests would.
For anybody that can't wait until 2 months from now when we're doing original research, here's just a really quick thing. Open up a Google Doc and type in, if you could ask 100 of your peers one question, what would it be? Another good one is what's something related to your role that you recently had to turn to Google to try to find the answer for. And then another one is like, I forget exactly how we ask it, but it's something like what's something you wish you had the data on? What's something you wish you had the statistics for? I can't remember how we asked that question. But they're kind of three ways of asking the same question, and those will feed your original research document. So once you got 10, you start asking those.
We've done a podcast episode on it and a blog post on it. I just dropped it in the link here. So again, we're going to do an entire mastermind on it. But if you want to get ahead or start looking at this stuff now, in the chat you'll see a blog post for it. Logan, what questions do we have?
So we had one from Ethan, yet again, the first contributor, who's pre-meeting with their guests and for how long versus email exchange. I can speak to this. I almost always only booked one call with my guests on B2B growth, partially because we do such high volume as a daily show. I've started to slow that down a bit and do a 15-minute discovery call. Sometimes I'm through them in about 10 minutes. So it doesn't always even take 15 minutes. And I definitely don't think you need a half hour. And then I book 30 minutes for the interview itself. And I've found that I'm glad that, the Phil Dunphy quote that I always come back to, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I was a little afraid to slow down here, but slowing down has actually sped up the interaction with the guest. James and I have talked a ton about in content-based networking, when you have multiple interactions with your guest, that second and third time is really where the relational magic starts to happen and you feel more depth to the conversation. So I feel like slowing down has not only benefited the content, but it's benefited the relationship that I want to develop with that guest as well. So that's what it's been like for me. 15 minutes pre-interview, 30 minutes booked for the interview. Ethan, any follow-ups to that before we go tackle another question?
No, most of my discovery, like as I'm thinking about the structure of this, most of what I do is a blend of some agency reaches out and wants to get someone on the podcast. I'm like, that's a cool conversation or an interesting background or an interesting topic that I think is part of the broader conversation I'm trying to produce. So I already have a bunch of information and I don't need anything. Some of it is a mutual introduction, so it falls somewhere in between. And some of it is Sweetfish going out and targeting people at companies that we're interested in. And so I don't really know much about them or like the one that released today. Really interesting business model. I didn't know that dude. I didn't know his business. But they were on our target list and you all did a nice job of getting the director of sales for me. And so that's one where I could stand to do some of the POV work. I've traditionally been doing it via Alexis or via an email exchange and or via my own, like looking at their LinkedIn profile, reading their website, etc. And I had not kind of, when I get to that meeting, when it's scheduled, I just want to get going, you know? And I feel like some of the POV stuff, I want to hear fresh, just like I want them to say it fresh. Right? Like I don't want them to restate themselves 72 hours later in a way that we've already kind of unpacked. There's something kind of about, especially, and then I'll stop. I love this idea of having people find their voice through the conversation such that they feel like they could now give a presentation, whereas before they couldn't. I think so many people are struggling to find their voice. It's a common conversation on LinkedIn, for example. It's in text, it's in video, it's everywhere. So this ability to do that for people, but the process of them discovering their voice through the conversation, to me feels like something fresh. I don't want to like pull any of that stuff too soon. So I'm just kind of, when I asked that, I was thinking, okay, I know how I'm doing it now. What am I missing? How could I do it better?
Yeah. I mean, I think in your case, it definitely lends itself more to that third scenario that you described versus the 1 and 2 guest scenarios that you laid out. But there could be a way to where, hey, I'm researching this person, but I don't really have anything. Maybe you could incorporate some of these questions into that email exchange just to see, okay, I see that they kind of get pumped up on this, but they just typed it out. I'm not going to give them my questions. I'm not going to walk them through how I'm going to dig, but through that email exchange, asking that, might tee you up. So I also like the, having the fresh realness to the conversation. It's part of the reason we've been opening up with, hey, we like to get to know our guests. Ethan, what's on your home screen right now? Dan, what was the first concert you went to? That sort of thing, and not letting them know what question I'm going to ask there. So I think there's a couple ways to go about it. Cassidy asked a follow-up question. Any thoughts about building your original research questions into your show structure? We actually toyed with this. We're eventually going to turn the original research into a research product. So that's part of the reason we're framing it as premium content, and we're doing it post-interview. However, doing some of those, Ethan has done a really good job of asking consistent questions on the front end and the back end of his episodes, not necessarily framed as original research, but then he's been able to repackage those and say, hey, I've asked 50 people the same question, and that can be repurposed into content, whether it's, framed as original research or not. So I think that there could be a case for either one. There could be a case for taking one of those and having it be part of the episode, and then having 9 of those be post interview, and then it's a different content asset. It's premium content that you're pushing people toward, something like that. We've kind of landed on that side of it for our case, but I don't think that either is right or wrong. I think there's pros and cons to both.
I would agree with that. I think you could go either direction. I think you could bake them into your actual episodes, Cassidy. Or you could do it like we're doing it and do it outside and then frame it up as this premium piece of content. I don't think it would be a bad thing at all to tack it in. I've noticed that as we've been getting, I think Cassidy, you actually you did some of you contributed to this. So as we've been reaching out and asking people to answer these questions, we do a lot of them post interview, but I've been going back to some of our previous guests and trying to get our previous guests to answer these questions. And they range, some people elaborate more than others. So some of our videos end up being 3 minutes that I get back from people. Other people take 9 minutes. So if you're trying to keep your episodes in a 15 to 20 minute framework, depending on what your goals are with your show and where you're trying to land on the amount of content you want each episode to be, so that could be a factor to think about. Is just, okay, I know that for me to do the original research that I want to do, I really want to ask these 9 questions, but it's going to end up pushing, our episode length out. So maybe I do want to do it as a separate thing. So just some things to consider, but honestly, I think you could do it either way. Catherine asks, our episodes have been 45 minutes. Is that too long? What are your thoughts here, Logan?
I did a post on LinkedIn about this recently. When I get asked how long do podcast episodes need to be, my answer is always they need to be as long as they need to be. If they're too short and they don't unpack something enough and they're not left with that how, then that's too short. If there's a lot of filler and fluff, then they're too long. But we've done hour-long episodes of B2B growth that I think are phenomenal, and we've done 12-minute episodes that I think are very valuable as well. I don't think that there's a magic number to the podcast length. I think as long as you're having empathy for your listener and thinking, does this match to what they want to get out of it, then you're doing them a service.
My original thought here was that if you'd asked me this a year and a half ago, I probably would have said that 45 minutes is too long, because I was hearing people talk about the average commute time. People want to get an episode in on their way to work. And so, for the first, 1,500 episodes or so of B2B growth, we tried to do 12 to 20 minute episodes. Like, we want you to be able to get an episode in on your way to work. But we just saw from experience, there were certain episodes that Logan and I were doing on our Behind the Curtain series where we're unpacking ideas that just needed more time to really flesh everything out. And I think it was the one I'm thinking of, I think it was like 53-minute episode. And we got a lot of engagement on LinkedIn, people actually posting on LinkedIn about that particular episode. And I thought, man, like my original thinking was wrong. Like, we don't need to try to shove things into a 20-minute episode. If it's a topic that needs more room to breathe, then it needs more room to breathe. And so I've now shifted. I don't do a lot of interviews on B2B growth anymore, but the ones I do, I say, hey, we're going to go on ahead and block an hour. So, sometime, most of our episodes don't go that long, but I want to block that time just in case we need it. So hopefully that helps, Catherine. I would say, I would agree with Logan 100%. I wouldn't feel like you have to lock in and say we have to do 45 minutes or we have to do 20. But
the balance to that, I think, is that, with B2B growth, we've kind of become known for those more succinct tactical episodes. So if there's not a real pressing reason to go longer, then I'm going to kind of stick to our general norm. When people have something to expect, Sales Hacker is a show that does a good job of mixing up different lengths. They have, interviews with sales leaders that are about their career journey that often are 30 to 50 minutes because that format kind of fits that. And then their Friday Fundamental series are 5 to 10 minute, quick, punchy, tactical episodes. So there's even a case for, hey, we could kind of build a cadence for different episode lengths based on different formats as well. But I don't think you have to lock yourself into anything. But setting some precedent with listeners, can be helpful, and then experimenting from there. There was something Timmy mentioned in this last slide that we still have up. Don't be afraid to interrupt. I just wanted to encourage everybody on this call who's a host of their show, or to encourage the host of their show that you're involved with. I'm an Enneagram 9. So I am the peacemaker. I am the, all right, whatever you want. This, it's great. I love what you said there. I tend to kind of drift there, but I've found myself kind of forcing myself to interrupt my guests a little bit more often, either when they're going long, or there's just, I know that they're going to keep going on something, but I know that a listener is saying, like they just said, well, like there's several things you could do here that would make that work. And they keep talking and finding a spot to be like, hold on, I want you to finish that, but you mentioned several things. What are some of those things? And it will get them to stop and realize the importance of doubling down on what they said and going a little bit deeper. Now, there are times where you just want to make a note of that and you want to circle back to it. Something you said kind of halfway through what you were talking about, I want to come back to. You can definitely do that. But I think not being afraid to, hey, this is radio, we can't talk over each other or anything like that. Making it a real conversation. I've given myself a little bit more latitude to say, what? Hold on just a second, Ethan. What you said is really interesting. What do you mean by that phrase? And I think that kind of wakes your guest up a little bit so that they don't get into the, okay, I'm talking for 2 or 3 minutes to answer this question. And, your listener, we talk about it all the time. Listeners are walking, running, walking the dog, doing the dishes, whatever the case is. All of a sudden there's like an interruption in the conversation. They kind of get jolted back into listening a little bit. So it's, we all kind of have our own style, but I've been kind of getting out of my comfort zone there a little bit. And I think it's been helping. I can't say quantitatively, but that point I've kind of taken to heart and experimented with a little bit lately.
Hey, Logan, doubling down on what you're saying, I would also say as a podcast host, it's pretty powerful when, okay, so we've got somebody that has been on our show. I won't say who it is. It's somebody on our team, and they have a tendency to camp out in theory, and it can often sound like they're talking in circles, and that can really unnecessarily lengthen an episode. And one of the most powerful things that you can do is when you've tried to drill them for actionability, and they went and talked in theory and just talked in circles again. And then you tried it again, asking the question a different way, and they just went theory, circles again. Just pause the episode. Hey, I'm gonna quickly take a break from the recording for just a second. Hey, so what I'm looking for with this next question is I really want you to give me a step-by-step. So I'm gonna try like asking this question, and I really want our listeners to get like a step-by-step from you. And then they might feel a little bit embarrassed. So this is going to be really hard for a 9 to do, but it's going to make the content better for sure.
Any other questions, thoughts? Anybody want to share their experience with how they've been structuring their pre-interviews or the way they've been structuring their actual interviews?
I would just add that in addition to bookending my conversations, always asking everyone to define customer experience, because I'm bringing in people from different perspectives and organizations within a business. And my goal is to create common conversation around it. And then I always close with two kind of like nice gratitude type questions where you get to know the person a little bit better. And it gives me content where I can tag other brands and other people when I share those clips, because I'm asking them to name a person and name a company. I keep in my pocket, and I don't use them all the time. I use them if I don't have a depth of familiarity with the person or their business. I'll kind of keep them on the outline that I have for the conversation. And even when I have them in there, I won't always go to them. But something that's effective for me, again, is I'm trying to create these conversations from sales to marketing, from CS to marketing, from CS to product, product to sales, marketing to product. And so I'll keep, if I'm hosting a marketer, I'll ask, hey, what are one or two things that you wish more salespeople knew about marketing in the marketing process? So, and it's fun because sometimes people are like, man, you're asking me to like torch my teammates. I'm like, no, we're not doing that at all. But it creates this kind of like crosstalk from team to team, and just to build familiarity and understanding and empathy. And so I have a couple of those questions that I just keep in my pocket that serve the purpose of the show from my point of view, that this person probably has never been asked before on it. They've all been asked to talk about the problem that their business solves. They've all been asked about how they got to the seat that they're in if they were doing multiple podcasts, but it always seems like a fresh answer is what I'll say about that. So a couple of questions that serve the spirit or purpose of your show and advance the cause, you could truly ask to anyone. I found to be really, really useful.
I love that.
Thanks for adding that, Ethan. And we mentioned it earlier, but something that Ethan does in the way that BombBomb repurposes some of the podcast content, they take that question and they've done a separate playlist on YouTube, so you can go through and see a collection of how 75 different people, or however many folks that they've had on customer experience podcasts at this point, how they've answered that specific question. So it's a series of like 2-minute videos from the podcast, and it's in a specific playlist. And so I always thought that was a really cool execution of how you guys are repurposing that content.
Thanks. It's not lighting the world on fire, but it is like, I think it's important.
Do you embed, I'm assuming you embed those on the blog post as well, Ethan?
Yeah. I mean, we also host videos, a lot of the videos in the blog, something I have not taken enough time to do. The two main things I've not taken enough time to do. One is to advance this information within the organization. Some people take it upon themselves to listen to the podcast and ask follow-up questions and things, but there's so much I'm learning that I could be teaching internally, because our team members are also our would-be listeners. So that's one. And the other one is really doing that additional layer of content. I think we're okay at breaking down what we get in the recording, making video clips, having the blog posts, and these types of things, putting some of it in YouTube. What I haven't done yet that this type of additional publishing will create is more master level blog post about definitions of customer experience, or some other kind of bigger piece where I let these clips and these people talk to each other, or as you already talked about in this conversation, kind of compare and contrast these two people see it this way, these two people see it that way, or, these salespeople all talk in this type of language. Here are 3 examples of it in video, versus CS people tend to talk about it this way. And here are 2 videos of that, So I've not, it's hard. There's so much that can be done.
Yeah.
There's so much. It's just enough to get 5
but
episodes live every month.
Yeah. Right. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out with us this afternoon. I want to honor your time and close it out at the top of the hour. But if you have any questions about this stuff, we're going to we'll email the deck, and then we'll email the link to the YouTube video. We'll get this over to our to our audio and video manager, and he'll get it up on YouTube. And so expect that probably no later than tomorrow. So you'll have the deck and the video in your inbox if you want to share it with anybody on your team. But we hope this has been super helpful. Next month, we're going to be talking about a hybrid style of episode that we've started doing for a recent customer. It's a hybrid between interview and narrative. So this particular customer has figured out a really cool framework to do narrative in a pretty low lift way. Mostly, most narrative podcasts, you're spending dozens and dozens of hours on scripting and doing that kind of thing. But Eric Olson from Art of Problem Solving has figured out a much more simple, low lift way to do narrative. And so he's going to be teaching next month on the structure that he's landed on and how we're working with him to do that style of episode. So definitely stay tuned for that next month. I'll update the calendar invite and put the headline in there so you know it's coming up. But really excited to chat with you again next month. And if you have any questions from now until then, know that you can reach out to me at any time, James at sweetfishmedia.com, Logan at sweetfishmedia.com, and excited to chat with you again next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
bye, guys.
This is awesome.